All right, thus far we have done character lessons. This is the last character lesson in this series. This is lesson number 12, if you believe it or not. Who is here for Superman? Way back when we did the Superman. About half of you. We did Superman, Batman, Darth Vader, Spider-Man, Peter Pan, Lord of the Rings, Pinocchio, Michael Jordan, Elon Musk, Walt Disney, Henry Ford, and today is the X-Men. We're gonna do the X-Men today. So I'm looking forward to that. Take notes if you want to. After the lesson, I'm gonna ask, we'll spin the wheel. I'm gonna ask a difficult 1 or 2 questions. And if you get it right, you can choose either the mystery box or the main prize. All right, ready? In the 1960s, comic book readers had Superman, they had Batman, they had Captain America, they even had Spider-Man, but they didn't have a team. They didn't have a team of superheroes. Even the Avengers were not around yet. And the X-Men were a result of comic book fans writing into Marvel and to DC saying, we want a team. We want to read about a team of superheroes. So that is where the X-Men came from. It was from fans basically saying we want just not just individual comics, but we want a team. So X-Men number 1 debuted September way back in 1963, believe it or not. So the X-Men came about in 1963, September. It was very popular in the beginning, but then kind of phased out for a little while and then became popular again in the 70s. The original X-Men, the team, included Professor X, that's why, or Professor Xavier, that's why they're called the X-Men, because Professor Xavier put them together, okay? Yeah, he was always in a wheelchair, yep. The X-Men, the original X-Men were Professor X as the leader, Cyclops, Miss Marvel, who would later be called Jean Grey, Iceman, Angel, who would later become the Archangel, and Beast. Now, Angel, if you guys know the X-Men at all, Archangel has like metal wings. If you remember that? In the original comics, he had white feather wings, like an eagle. He didn't come out until Incredible Hulk number 181, actually, later on. Yep. And Beast in the original team was not blue. He was just kind of like a hulking kind of guy, basically. He had like oversized hands and feet. That's really who he was. There's different variants where actually different characters lead the X-Men. Cyclops was, I think, the main one who did after Professor X died, yeah. Wolverine led it once, Storm led it once. I can't remember who else. But yeah. What's that? Yeah, I don't think he ever did, actually. I don't know. The X-Men were created by the comic writer Stan Lee. You've probably heard of his name. He's the guy creator of Spider-Man. He was in a lot of the Marvel movies, little cameos and stuff. So Stan Lee and another guy that you may not have heard of, his name is Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby actually is responsible for a lot of really famous characters that you guys know about today. Jack Kirby created Captain America. Not Stan Lee, but Jack Kirby did. And Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did work together on a lot of things, but Jack Kirby is credited with Captain America. He's also credited with Iron Man, Jack Kirby is. The Avengers, putting those characters together, Thor and Captain America and those kind of guys, putting them together, and Ant-Man. Jack Kirby created those characters, a bunch of others as well, but those are kind of the main ones that he put together. The superheroes and the villains in the X-Men universe are primarily what's called mutants. That's like the world that is created with the X-Men, they're mutants. Originally, Stan Lee, he wanted to call the comic book simply The Mutants, but his director said, nobody knows what a mutant is. And in the 60s, he was right. Nobody really would have known what a mutant was in the 60s. So he said, no, you can't call it the mutants, you got to come up with something else. So that's how he came up with the name X-Men after the founding character, Professor X, okay? What's interesting is the X-Men and the actual, in US history, the civil rights movement were going on at the same time, which is pretty interesting. And a lot of the X-Men storylines, even till today, ride around that storyline of discrimination, racism, that sort of thing. So in the 63, the civil rights movement was very much right in the middle of it. If you think about it, Rosa Parks, when she didn't give up her seat on the bus, that was in 1955. And then the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr. was in 1963, but it was in August of 63, just a month before the X-Men comic came out. Isn't that wild? So that's how closely related these actual historical events were to the X-Men comics. And you see that theme woven throughout the X-Men comics, which is pretty interesting. And then, of course, with MLK being assassinated in 68. So that was about the time when the X-Men really were starting to really take off. They waned for a little bit, and then they came back in the 70s. As far as the X-Men storyline, from the beginning, the X-Men followed the theme of discrimination, bigotry, and racism. Mutants were born with their powers and their deformities. They were not aliens like Superman. They didn't get bit by a radioactive bug like Peter Parker, Spider-Man. They didn't get exposed to radiation like the Hulk. They were just born that way. And typically their powers would come out of them, so to speak, at puberty, when they went into their adolescent years, when their bodies were changing, the children, also the powers would come out usually at that time as well in the story. In the world of X-Men, you had humans that did not have altered DNA, and then you had humans who had altered DNA, and they would be called the mutants. Professor X, he wanted to work towards a world where mutants and regular humans coexisted peacefully, where they could work together, and that mutants could actually help build a better world with the regular humans. But then you had another guy. Does anyone know the main bad guy? What's his name? Magneto. And he was in that video. He was the guy that that was a young Professor X. That was Magneto, of course, Wolverine, and then the fast guy. Does anyone know what the fast guy's name is? Was that what you were gonna say, Patrick? Yeah, it was Quicksilver, right. Who is Marvel's version of who? Flash, very good, right. So you see this when someone would be born with a mutation in their DNA, and then they go into adolescence, they go into puberty, and something changes. Unusually, the regular humans a lot of times would discriminate against them. And Magneto, he also had a X-Men team. It wasn't, they weren't called X-Men, they were called the Brotherhood of Mutants. So Magneto, also his name was Eric Langcher. Basically what happened was he got mad because regular humans, and rightly so, regular humans abused him, abused his family, that sort of thing. So he had a hatred towards regular humans. So it was like basically a discrimination going both ways. And what Magneto wanted to do is he wanted his mutants to not help the humans, but to eliminate them, either enslave them or eliminate them. And Professor X and the X-Men did not want that to happen. They felt that was morally wrong. And so that's where a lot of the clashing came between Professor X and the X-Men and Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants. That's where that conflict came from. All right. Class of mutations. Class of mutations. And we're getting into some life lessons of the X-Men. They follow the Greek alphabet, which is kind of interesting. This is going to go from lowest to highest as far as mutations and their powers. You ready? Epsilon. Epsilon class. This class of mutants, their mutation is very weak. They don't really have much powers, but it causes severe physical abnormalities. Like they would be a weird color, like blue. Maybe they'd be like really hairy or something. There's one character, you can look him up later. His name is Beak, and he has like this odd, like bird-like beak kind of thing, but he doesn't really have any powers. So that's an example of the Epsilon class, where it really changes your physical appearance, but you're not very powerful. So obviously that class would be discriminated against a lot, if that makes sense, because they don't have any powers, but they look very different. Deltas are rather weak, but they have some passive powers. And their mutation does not make them look odd. They look like normal people. They can go into society and be unnoticed, but they do have powers, but they're pretty low and they're pretty passive. Does anyone know Domino from the Deadpool world, that girl? Do you know what her superpower is? Do you know? It's luck. Okay, like that's her power. She just finds herself kind of in lucky places. So that's kind of an example of a passive power. She doesn't have like laser beams or super strength or anything like that, and she looks normal. She can just go out into the world and no one would know. The gamma classification, they're a little more powerful, and they have physical deformalities that they cannot control. Beast is a good example of this. So Beast is blue, right? He can't control being blue, but he has powers that are pretty impressive. He can like jump around and he can swing and he's like powerful and that sort of thing. What, JJ? He's super smart, right, yep. Nightcrawler is another example of this this gamma classification. Again, he can't control how he looks and he can teleport, if you guys know who that is. Beta class, they are moderately powerful. And they're able to use their powers as they decide to. Wolverine's a good example of a beta class. Sabretooth, Rogue, and Gambit, they would be good examples of the beta class. So he can live a long time because of his healing factor, so it slows down his aging just because of his healing factor. And that's how he's able to have his adamantium skeleton and his claws, because like every time he pops his claws and then they go back in, he has to heal, you know. So if he didn't have a healing factor, he wouldn't be able to do that. He couldn't take the adamantium either. His body wouldn't survive. So that's why he was chosen as the Weapon X to do that. I don't know anything about comics, clearly, but good question. So that's the beta class. Alpha class, this is the second highest as far as powerful mutants go. They're the second to the most. Their powers are pretty extreme, but they're also under control. Cyclops is a good example of this. Havoc is a good example, and Mr. Sinister are good examples of this alpha class of mutants. The strongest classification of mutants is the Omega class. This class of mutants are the most powerful, and they're basically, the phrase is gods among men, is kind of the idea of this class. Basically, they could wipe out a city if they wanted to. That's this class. Professor X, Magneto, Jean Grey, when she's in the Phoenix mode, they would be what's considered Omega class, okay? Let me give you some life lessons from the X-Men. Any questions on that before I move on? All right, life lessons from the X-Men. Number 1, power is a tool. Power is a tool. It's not always the solution. All mutants, in one form or another, whether you're an Epsilon class or an Omega class, all mutants had some sort of power. They had some sort of interesting power, some unique power. They could do something, whether strong or weak. And some mutants, they would use their powers to control people. They'd use them to push people around. They would even use their powers to even eliminate people that they didn't agree with or they didn't like. If they disagreed with you, some mutants would just as soon kill you. Sabretooth is a good example of that. The Juggernaut is a good example of that. They would use their powers because they're stronger than the adversary in front of them. Maybe it's a regular human or a weaker mutant. And if they disagreed with you, if they didn't like you, they would just wipe you out because I'm stronger, is basically what they would do. These would be the super villains. The super villains. Other mutants use their powers to help people, to save people, to defend people against other mutants or even themselves. These were the superheroes of the story. The more powerful a power that these mutants had, and if used in the right way, the superheroes could do more good. If they took their power and they used it in the right way, at the right time, in the right direction, they could do a lot of good. Obviously, the same is with the other direction as well. If you're a supervillain and you have a power, you aim it in the direction, maybe you choose that direction, but sometimes those supervillains would regret. There's actually a story, you guys have seen the Marvel movies, The Civil War, right? Captain America and all that Civil War. Do you know that's based on a 2000s comic series that actually surrounded more of the X-Men than the Avengers? Did you know that? So there was a guy, his name was Speedball, And he was a kind of a lower end mutant, but he wanted to prove himself. And so him and his little team, they went after some pretty bad guys. And I don't remember the guy's name, but he wasn't that bad of a villain, but he was still a super villain. He had this power where he could like energize himself and then make an explosion. Well, he got so upset that he made this explosion and he wiped out an elementary school with all the kids in it. So that was the storyline that started the Civil War, because all of a sudden, because of that event, the government got involved and they wanted all the mutants and superpowered people to reveal their what? Does anyone know? Their identity, right, their identity. Spider-Man, I think, eventually did it. Iron Man was for those accords, Captain America was not. So it started with an X-Men thing and went to Captain America and Iron Man and the Avengers and that sort of thing. So that's an example of mutants a little bit out of control. Well, not a little bit, a lot out of control. So that's a pretty good series. If you ever want to check it out, it's just a Civil War, Marvel Civil War issue number 1, and it shows where the Civil War began. Pretty interesting. As far as we go, now we may not have superpowers, right? We're not like Cyclops. We can't put, lasers out of our eyes. We can't pop claws like Wolverine. I always thought that would be cool to have that, right? When I was a kid, and I loved Wolverine. Notice my blue and yellow. No one complimented my blue and yellow. Thank you, JJ. I appreciate that. You did mention something, didn't you? That's right. I wore blue and yellow because that was the X-Men's original colors. Yes, sir.
You kind of do look like Wolverine if you were a little shorter.
A little bit of a little shorter. Had that spiky hair. What? Without the glasses, yeah. But we may not have mutations, we may not have superpowers, but we do have different powers. We all have different powers. Some of us have mechanical and engineering type minds. Some of us in this room are amazing at math. I'm not one of them. But there's some people, even in this room, that are really good with stuff like that. They're good with engineering, they're good with math, and so really that's kind of like a superpower. There's some people that have that kind of superpower. There's some people who have a really outgoing and talkative personality. And you can take that personality and you can use it. It's a power. It's like a superpower. Some of you in here, and I know some of you in here, that have this power, I would call it grit. Some of you in here have grit, where you're faced with something, you have to do something, maybe you really don't want to do it, but you know what? I'm just gonna put my nose to the grindstone, I'm gonna put my feet on the floor, and I'm gonna go. And I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna get it done. That's called grit. And then some people don't have that. They don't have that patience. They don't have that ability to push through difficult situations. Some of you in here have that power, and I really kind of call it a superpower, where you can do things you don't want to do because you have to. That's pretty amazing, really. Some of you just fold, and maybe you don't have that power, but some of you can do it. We all have different gifts, we all have different talents, and like a superpower, like a mutation, if used in the right way at the right time, it really could benefit you and push you towards success. So of course my question is, what's your superpower? What do you have that's kind of unique compared to other people? You don't have to answer right now, but everyone is unique in their own way. It could be a personality thing, it could be an interest, it could be something you're really good at. That's like, you know what, I'm kind of good at this. It could be just something you like that other people don't really like. It could be something that you're interested in. That definitely could be your superpower. Life lesson number 2. Know what you believe, and then stand up for it. Know what you believe, and then stand up for it. Do you know what you believe? Do you know what you believe to be true? The X-Men did, and they put their life on the line for it. They knew what they believed to be true. They knew that discrimination and racism and bigotry was wrong. And just because you're weaker than them physically doesn't mean you're lesser. And so they protected the humans. For Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants, no, they didn't see it that way. And so the X-Men stood up for that because of their belief. They didn't have to, but because they believed it to be true, they stood up for it. I want to ask you a couple questions, and I want you to just kind of think about these in your mind for a minute. Just keep them to yourself, just think about it for a second. What do you believe? What do you believe? Then take that belief and put it against this question. Is it actually true? Okay? So you take a belief, and then you line it up with what is actually true. Is it actually true? Then you have to ask yourself, do I have all the information? Do I actually have all the right information, and am I interpreting that information correctly? And if I am, if my belief lines up with what is actually true, if I have enough or the right information, and I am interpreting that information correctly, then the next question is, what now? What do I do with it? What do I do with that belief? What do I do with that truth? Sometimes we have to stand up and we have to say, that's not right. Or we have to stand up and say, that is right. I'm going to keep going in that direction. In the right way and at the right time. All right, I want you guys to give me this answer. I want to see what you guys think. I'll take a couple of you guys. Define the word right. Or in other words, what does it mean to be right? And I don't mean the right side of your body or that direction. What does it mean to be right? JJ, what does it mean to be right? Is it what you said it's what you believe? Okay. So you feel it inside of yourself that this is actually right. I believe it to be true. Okay? Okay?
Something that you think is correct, or you know for a fact that is correct.
Something you think is correct. Okay, use the word correct. Or you know for a fact it's correct. Okay, there's some key words you said there. Correct and fact. Tell me what the word right means, or what does it mean to be right? Come back to you? Okay. What?
So like,
Caden.
Like to be right, like someone says like that you're not right and you end up being right, correct?
Okay, so you're validated later?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
When you know they're wrong.
Okay, when you know something's wrong, you just, how would you know it though? Okay.
A statement that's scientifically.
Okay, all right. A statement that's scientifically correct. One more, JJ. That can be very right sometimes, yeah. So let me tell you this, a couple things about right. You ready? Being right, or right as a definition, does not mean a couple things. Let me tell you what it doesn't mean. It does not mean being morally superior. Okay? It does not mean being morally superior. It does not mean that your opinion is the only one that's valid. One right does not always guarantee always right. Do you hear me? One right does not always guarantee always right. It'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't. And this is something that I kind of want to hone in for a minute. I want you guys to get this. What you feel, as far as your emotions go, does not always mean it's right. Because our feelings, our emotions sometimes can what? Does anyone know? Be wrong, or the word is deceive us. What'd you say, JJ? Mixed? That's ambivalence. That's where you have like multiple feelings at one time. Sure. So here's a good way to say what right is. You ready? And a lot of Evan, Caden, Landon, you guys were really close to kind of where I was going. Right is this, and JJ started it actually. Right is having a belief or understanding that aligns with reality. Having a belief or understanding that aligns with reality and has a correct outcome. Another way to say it is this: your opinion must be based on well-known or well-established, what word did you use? Facts. And that's what Landon was saying about being scientifically proven. I can believe all day long that it's sunny outside. You can lock me in a room for months and not expose me to the outside, and I can be certain that it's sunny outside and it's warm outside because I've been in this box for too long. I know it to be true. I feel it in my soul. And then you let me out of the box, and I look out that window, and what's it doing? It's snowing. Because I feel something, because I believe something to be true, may not be the actual facts of the matter. Because I didn't have what? The correct information, right? So in order for me to establish a belief of what's right, I have to have the correct information, I have to interpret it correctly, and I have to align my belief with what is actually true. Does that make sense? All right. That all came from number 2, which was know what you believe and stand up for it. But before you stand up for it, you better have your facts in line. Make sense? Because what Kaya said, sometimes you can be right, or maybe it was Caden. Sometimes you can be right and prove the other person wrong. Well, that was Kaya's. Was that you? My bad. But sometimes you can go the other way too, right? Have you ever been certain of something and then you found out more information and you're like, oh yeah, my bad. Has anyone ever been there?
Yeah.
I've been there lots of times because I didn't have the right information or I misinterpreted the information. Okay. Number 1 was this: power is not a tool, or excuse me, power is a tool, excuse me. Number 1 is power is a tool. It's not always a solution. Number 2 is know what you believe and stand up for it. Number 3 is this: racism and bigotry are never okay. They're never okay. In the comics and the stories, I'll give you in a second, Landon. In the comics and the stories, the mutants face discrimination and racism throughout all the comics. You good? All the comics. And then in the movies, if you guys watch the movies, that is a common theme, especially in the first 3 movies. That is the common theme of the story. Should Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants, the bad mutants, should they have been upset about what was going on in the world? Of course they should have. Of course they should have. But they responded to this injustice in the wrong way. They responded to this injustice with violence and in turn became racist themselves. And they came after the normal people because they hurt them. Well, just because you hurt someone, because I hurt someone, because if you've hurt someone, it doesn't make you non-dignified or not have value. Because there's always what kind of chance? First chances, and then there's what? Second chances. I would almost argue every time, possibly. It would depend on how the person deals with the offense. Here's a good way to say it. But sometimes, I'm not saying hand out second chances like easy sometimes. Sometimes it has to be.
There's like cases of like murder cases, like the person that let's say they're
Sure, but they still have to face their consequence, don't they? Right, right. You can forgive someone, but they still have to face that consequence.
like you give them a second chance, and I don't know like what a second chance would be.
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah. Just for fun, let me kind of address that real quick because I think it's important. I would say a second chance is the opportunity to make amends. It doesn't mean, let's say someone wrongs you. Let's say I steal your car, right? And I flaunt your car, and I got JJ's car, your diesel truck. I got your 7.3. I got your 7.3, and I'm cruising with it, and I'm abusing it and whatever, and I see you and I wave at you, whatever. And then I come back and I say, all right, JJ, I'm all done with your 7.3. I'm all done with your diesel truck. you can have it back now, right? Right? If I treat it that way, are you going to be quick to say, oh, no problem, Rodney? No, not at all. You're going to punch me in the throat, and probably rightly so, right? It's not going to be good for me. But what if circumstances were different? What if I took your 7.3 because I had to get to the hospital? Maybe it was an emergency. Had to get to the hospital. I didn't have time to tell you. I took it, went to the hospital, and I came back and said, man, JJ, I'm really, really sorry, but that is an emergency. Please forgive me. I even washed it for you and filled it up. Would it be a little bit different?
It would be like the circumstances of like the situation, like if you weren't able to do something like that, I just saw you pull like grabbing it with a truck.
Right. What are you gonna?
Be some issues.
Of course there is. I mean, there's issues either way. But if I approach you flippantly and I don't care about you and your truck, you're not gonna be quick to offer that second chance, right? But if I'm like, dude, I'm really sorry, you know, and I'm showing remorse and all that, you may give the opportunity for reconciliation, not right away, right? And that's okay, that's part of the consequence. But depending on how the person approaches you, what they really feel, what they believe. So anyway, we can talk about that more later, but yeah, it would depend on the situation there. Okay, where am I at here? So when it comes to the whole theme of racism, discrimination, that sort of thing, remember the beginning X-Men comics were written right during the Civil Rights Movement. That's when they were being written. And I want to tell you something. I talked about belief and what is right. Let me tell you something that I believe this. I believe this. I believe that no matter what our mutation, no matter what our color, no matter what our background, no matter what our history is, our nationality, whatever it is, I believe in my gut, in my soul, that we are better together. That's what I believe. And selfishly, the reason I believe that is because if you have something to offer this world, I may want to glean from it. If you have a good idea, or if you're intelligent about something, I want to learn from you, no matter what you look like or where you came from. I believe every person, no matter their race, their gender, their history, has something to offer, not just this world, but maybe even me specifically. There's a really great clip. I'd like to show it to you sometime. It's Elon Musk. And he's out there, he's outside, he's on one of the launch pads, he's talking about his rockets, he's talking about this with this interview guy. Just a guy with a microphone, kind of a news thing. This guy is a nobody, really. You have the richest man in the world, and frankly, probably one of the smartest people in the world, and this kind of nobody interview guy is talking to him about his rockets, and just the guy says something, he's like, well, you know, wouldn't it be better if it was like this? Talking about his rockets. Like, what does this guy know about rockets, right? And Elon goes, yeah, that's actually a good idea. I'm gonna look into that. Yeah, that's a good idea. And like, he could have said, well, no, you know, I'm smarter than you, I'm richer than you, how many rockets have you built? You don't know anything. But it's a good example of Elon, who was born in South Africa, by the way. Elon seeing this kind of nobody guy, and he gleaned a lesson from this interview guy. The smartest, possibly in the most rich person in the world, gleaned from a news reporter. Isn't that wild to me? I like that idea. Anyway, there you go. Let's see here. I think I can learn from anybody, whether that's a book or a podcast, a direct instruction from a teacher or a counselor, or just observing someone's life. I'm gonna observe your life and I'm gonna see what mistakes you make, what successes you have, so that I can glean lessons from that. So maybe if you made a mistake, I'm not gonna step in that same hole, and vice versa. If I mess up, I may share that with you so then you guys don't make the same mistake. I think and I believe we are better together, no matter what our color, no matter what our age, no matter what our race and history. That's what I believe. I believe all people are worthy of honor and respect. Maybe not their actions. And JJ, that's kind of maybe what you're alluding to. Maybe not their actions, but as a person, as a person, I believe every person, no matter what your skin color, background, your socioeconomic status, I believe everyone is worthy of honor and respect. Again, not always our behavior, right? If you do good, that's worthy of respect. If you do poorly, maybe that action's not worthy of respect. But you as a person still hold on to your dignity. That's what I believe. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns on anything that we talked about today? All right, you guys ready for the pay attention prizes? Okay. All right, here we go.